Okay, today we are starting a new lesson on atmospheric perspective. So before we get too far into what it is and how to do this in the computer, let's first look at this image. This image is a great example of what atmospheric perspective is. So when you see this image, the first things you want to think about are, what do you notice about the colors of the hills, both in front of us and as they get farther and farther away? Are they staying the same color or are they changing? So what we're first going to notice is right here in front of us, the closest definitely is the darkest, and slowly it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And this is known as atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective refers to the effect the atmosphere has on the appearance of objects when you look at them from a distance. You see objects further back into the distance less clearly, and their color changes in value, saturation, and hue. And the atmosphere itself depends a lot on location as well. Some things that can affect how hazy an atmosphere are if there's forest fires in the area, if you're in a big major city, if there's air pollution, if there's a lot of moisture or condensation in the air, that can also create a more hazy effect as well. And again, this is another example of atmospheric perspective. What is closest to us is most easy to discern all the different leaves. We can see all the different forms and shapes and bushes. And it also is the most darkest in comparison to the rest. Each layer of mountains, I like to kind of refer to them almost as their own separate layer. Each set of them slowly gets lighter and lighter and also becomes a bit more difficult to see in comparison to this first layer. So one of the key aspects of atmospheric perspective is value. Now, the word value essentially means how light or dark something is. If you've ever taken a studio art class, you've probably practiced shading values, so going from really dark into really light. In order to make it pretty easy to understand, this is a photograph, atmospheric perspective, just in a grayscale, no colors involved. And it really helps demonstrate the point that the hills appear to kind of fade into the distance and get lighter and lighter compared to this first set in front. And again, these are some different examples, both in thinking about landscapes as well as the city. And the city environment is what I was mentioning before. The smog of the city is really going to impact just how clear or hazy your image is. But again, all of these are different examples of atmospheric perspective, in which the closest objects are the clearest and easy to see. They are the darkest colors as well, and as it gets farther, each layer or each set of mountains or buildings gets lighter in color as well. And these actually are some digital images. So these specifically focus more on city elements, thinking about how you can also incorporate nature into some of them. But again, what we're noticing is that this first set or first layer in front of us is always the darkest and most clear, and slowly gets darker, slowly gets lighter and lighter. Sorry. Now, for this assignment, you ultimately will be creating your own cityscape, demonstrating atmospheric perspective using Photoshop. When you're making this, I want you to consider the use of buildings, but also, if you want, including elements of nature, whether it's in the foreground or background. You can include lighting or windows, creating a haze element as it gets farther back. But the most important thing is, of course, the darkest colors should always be in front, never the back. So let's get started in Photoshop. So I already have Photoshop open, or I thought I did. So let's just take a pause and I'll come back when Photoshop opens. Okay, so once Photoshop opens, I'm just going to go into File and make a new image for myself. Okay, so as always, you want to make sure that you give your image a name. I will call this just my Cityscape. Make sure that you have the correct size. So for inches, I'm going to make it wide by 11 inches. And then the height, I'll make 8.5, a standard size. And resolution, I'm going to keep at 300, just because that way if I want to blow it up when I print it, it'll be nice and easy to figure out. And the image will be nice and clear. Press create. Okay. So this right now is what I'm working with. I actually might just make this background invisible for now, but I'm going to make a new layer on top. Okay. So this first layer is what we're going to start with. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. I'm going to go over 2 tools that you can use in making a landscape or cityscape, essentially. The first I'm going to go over is this tool right here, the rectangular marquee tool. So this is super helpful if you want to make buildings. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my first set of buildings. So I'm going to click and drag. A simple rectangle. I always like to make sure that I'm going to be adding to my selection, because what I can now do is simply just keep adding my first layer of buildings. And you can connect the buildings together if you want. I'm going to make a little bridge for myself even. Like that. Just like that. This is my first set. So I'm going to now click my color. I'm kind of feeling this nice blue color right there. And then in that, I can now color that in. And right there, I have my first set of buildings. I'm going to deselect with Command D. And if I want to, I could even bring them down if I think they're too high, like that. Now I'm going to go into my next layer. My next layer, I'm going to create a new layer. And this is the part people usually tend to forget, but your layer for number 2 should actually be under layer 1. Because remember, the first layer we're working with is going to be the closest. So that's going to be the darkest. So I like to go back to layer 2 underneath. And now using the same tool, I'm going to start building some more. And you have, again, full control over whatever you want this to look like. I actually might even go and add some, don't like how that looks. Make sure it's nice and centered, like that. Add a little antenna to it. Maybe even have a building like that, a little water tower. Yeah. So again, I'm just sort of messing around, trying to fill in the space as much as I can. Okay. And again, going back to my dark color, I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. And then using my fill tool, my paint bucket, I'm just going to simply color it in like that. And slowly I am having a city start to form. Now again, as you're making this, if you notice that you're running out of space, you can always click on each layer and sort of move it down, make it fit a bit better. So one trick we can do as well is, let's say as I move my buildings back, as I'm making them, I want them to become a bit hazier. For that, I would increase the feather. The feather helps make that selection, that object, softer edged. Because right now my feather is 0 pixels. So let's actually put a pixel of, let's try 4. And now I'm going to make my next set of buildings. Uh-oh, wait, nope, don't do that, because you know what? I did not make a new layer for myself. So new layer, underneath, marquee tool. Okay, I'm kind of keeping a little simple right now. Nothing too crazy. Okay, and then when I fill it in, make sure that the color is lighter, like that. And you'll now actually notice the difference between those edges. So layer 2 had a feather of 0 pixels, and then layer 3 had a feather of 4 pixels. So slowly, if you increase each layer with the feather, it'll get more and more unfocused and hazy effect. Something else you can use as well is, if you would like, you can also use the lasso tool. The lasso tool I'm going to use to make a sort of background set of mountains for myself. So let's say I have this city, and you know what? I'm going to bring some of that down just a little bit more, make some more room for myself. Oh, there we go. Okay. And now for layer 4, I'm going to make a set of mountains kind of in the background. So using my lasso tool, making sure I'm always on add to selection, I'm going to start off just kind of drawing some mountain shapes. And the thing you want to know about mountains is that they're not perfect. They're not like straight zigzags like that, but instead, just sort of go with the flow. Let your hand kind of do what it needs to. Again, you can always go back and fix this if you need. And I always like to go all the way down in this. Again, making my color nice and light. And the feather on here, let's do 8. Let's see. Okay. And with that, I have a set of mountains, and I can actually keep kind of doing that. So I'm actually creating a whole sort of new city entirely now. So make a new layer, make a new set of mountains, and you can, again, I'm going to go back and fix that actually, because I don't like how my hand is doing this, but that. And then where I made that little mistake, I'm just going to sort of fix that up right there. Take the color, lighten it up, and then give it a nice fill. And then so on and so on. And already we're getting ourselves a cool city. Something else you can do as well is, once you have all your buildings set up, you can go back, you can go and add some more features to it. You can also, even using either the rectangle tool or some of the other tools as well, you can also go in and start kind of creating little windows for yourself. So actually, I'm going to go for a nice light shade of yellow for these. And like that. Okay, so that's sort of the basics in how to create a cityscape and have fun.